Welcome to the Apologetics Canada Conference. So glad that you're here. I hope that you enjoyed this video. This is session 1 of the Human Project. I'm going to say a little bit about that in a moment. Before I do, I just want to welcome you. We're so glad that you're here. As you can tell, we have a packed house, and I just want to welcome all of those that are in the live stream. We're glad that you're with us. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of work to put this conference together, and I got to tell you a little secret that I'm not the one who does it, and if you want something to go really well, you need to hand it off to your wife. And in fact, my wife works with me at Apologetics Canada. Her name is Nancy. She's right over here. Could you just give her a huge round of applause? Nancy and our staff have worked so hard to put this together for you, and I want to thank Terry and Steve and Tessa, all the work that they've done. And as well, I want you to know that there are over 80 volunteers this weekend that are going to be serving you. Let them know how much you appreciate the work that they're doing. We're not paying them. They're coming here on their own accord because they want to serve you this weekend. And I pray that you just have a great time here and that you feel welcome. As well, I just want to take a moment to thank Northview Community Church for hosting this event. Can we just give them a round of applause? Thank you for hosting this. Tonight, in a moment, we're going to be hearing a dialogue. And we're going to be thinking deeply and discussing deeply questions about the foundation of human rights. But before we do that, I want to take a moment just to tell you a little bit about the Human Project, because it's our desire that these sorts of discussions that we're going to do tonight, that these are discussions that you and I can do with our friends, family. These are discussions that we can have at church, in our community groups, maybe a book club. These are opportunities for us to think more deeply about some significant questions that are going on in our culture today. And in particular, there are 4 major questions that the Human Project seeks to address and get us discussing. And in fact, I just want to say, I know that there are a variety of different worldviews that are represented tonight. And I'm glad that you're here, because I believe firmly that we need to be discussing these sorts of questions. Questions like, what is human? What is the value of human life? What leads to human flourishing? And how should humans live? And so to do that, we have created a video resource. Apologetics Canada has partnered together with Power to Change. And we were so thankful to get to work with Power to Change this last year. We have been filming since September. We have filmed in Portland. We filmed in Seoul, Korea, Jinja, Uganda. In fact, by the way, that film you just watched was filmed at Jaja Barb's Home of Angels, and Banana Bread Barb, as she's known, is here, and she'll be here for the weekend. She's got a booth in the back. I'd encourage you to go chat with her. And as well, we filmed in Ottawa. And so the way that this Human Project works is to get us discussing on these topics. The way that happens is we have these short videos that tell you a story. This story is based on a true story. And it gets you discussing this topic through discussion questions. And then there is a time of teaching. It's about 20 minutes that uses a variety of different methods, including animation. And you'll see some of that in the back if you take a look. Again, getting us talking on these questions and seeing what are the answers to these questions. Beginning to develop a foundation to these questions. That teaching then goes for about 20 minutes, and then there's more discussion. If you would like to know more about these videos, you can purchase them in the back. Unfortunately, we don't have the hard copies here, but because they are delayed in coming, we are going to ship them to you for free. And in fact, we've made the Human Project at a discounted rate for the conference to encourage you to get that and to have those conversations. We have made it available as cheap as we can for the purpose of getting it out to as many people as possible. And if you would like to know more just even about that filming, Jake Bergen is here, and he was the one that was doing the filming. He's the director. He's in the back. You'll see there's a video booth. Jake is there. He'd love to talk with you if you like video stuff. One of the other things that we put together and that did come out that is here is a children's book called What Am I? To help you parents to have these sorts of discussions. It's called The Human Project for Kids. And this was co-authored with Rachel McKenzie. And she also is here. She's in the back by the book table at the Apologetics Canada table. She would love to talk with you about this and tell you more about that book. Well, tonight, before we get into the discussion, I want to take a moment to talk on the question of human flourishing. This is a question that we need to think a whole lot more about, in particular with where we are heading as a culture. One of the things that we do in the Human Project that I particularly like and I think is important is we take a time in the teaching to talk about historical events of where we've gotten these questions wrong and what we can learn from them as we move forward. And one of the historical events that I wanted to tell you about as we think about this tonight is that of China. Now, my goal in telling you about their history isn't to dog the Chinese, isn't to put them down, but it's to show an area in which they've gotten it wrong and what we can learn from it. You see, in 1949, when Mao Zedong came to power over the People's Republic of China, he was referred to as the great helmsman or captain, and the desire was that he would lead the nation into a utopian future of human flourishing. And this, in the teaching in the Human Project, we talk more about it, but I want to just go forward in history to 1970, where they went into a time of a national experiment on a scale that the world had never known. A desire to bring forward human flourishing, the Chinese did the exact opposite, oddly enough, and began to stop flourishing at its most fundamental level, the bringing forth of children. This was a policy that would come into effect by 1980 called the one-child policy. That policy said that you needed to be a certain age, you needed to be married, and you needed to not have a child in order to receive a birth permit to be able to have a child. During that time, as technology progressed, and also coupled with a tradition in China of preferring boys over girls in the sense that boys were the ones that carried forward the family name and the ones that would take care of you in old age. There began a gendercide on a level that the world has never known. Now, naturally, around the world, 105 boys will be born for every 100 girls. But in China, due to sex-selective abortions, that number skyrocketed to 160 boys being born for every 100 girls. China came out and shared that they determined that by 1980 to 2011, they have approximately reduced their population by 400 million people. 400 million people that do not exist because of the one-child policy. And of those 400 million, it is estimated that 50 million women are missing from Chinese society today due to those numbers. That means this. China has just recently published that they estimate by the year 2020, there will be 40 million men in China that are what are referred to as a bare branch. They are a biological dead end on the genealogical tree. They will not have the opportunity to be married. They will not have the opportunity to have children because those spouses literally do not exist. That is 1 in 5 Chinese today will not be able to get married. That number, by the way, is greater than the entire population of Canada, all male. And this is having interesting effects around the world. This isn't just happening in China, but everywhere. By the way, one that you might find interesting is there's something called in China building a nest to catch a phoenix. And when you have a lot of boys and a limited amount of girls, you have to do a lot of work to woo one of those females. And as you build that nest to encourage or to potentially woo a female partner for your son, one of the things that looks good is foreign property. In particular, Canadian property looks good as you're building that nest. This is well known in China and is interesting if you would like to look more into it. But the thing that I think is important for us to understand is that these ideas are more than just philosophical ideas. What we do has implications that are affecting not just China, but the world. In particular, in China, this is affecting them. Through this gender imbalance, it has been linked to an increase in violent crimes, crimes against women, substance abuse, gangs, sex trafficking, and suicide. China has some of the highest suicide rates in the world, in particular amongst women. And this is starting to tease its way out in a variety of ways that, like I said, are impacting the world, particularly through sex trafficking, that we need to think a lot more about. But the reason that I bring up this topic to you in this history is because I think that there's something important about it that we can learn. And that is that human flourishing, as we continue to see historically, is not brought about through economics or social engineering. And that's one of the reasons why China had pursued this, because it would be good for the economy. But what we're realizing over and over again is that human flourishing is fundamentally a relational question. And you and I, by the way, are in our own cultural experiment on a global level as we continue to embrace technologies that are having interesting effects on you and I, in particular about our relationships. See, one of the ways that you solve a problem where you have a lot of men and a limited amount of women are through things like pornography or through sex robots. And one of the things that we're beginning to see is an explosion in that area and a lot of thoughts being going into that. Is that good for me? Is that good for us as a society? Or what about the amount of time that we spend online? Is that good for us? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because tomorrow we are going to be having a series of rethink talks that are called Rethinking Technology, that are designed to get us to begin to dialogue on these important questions. You know, Harvard professor Robert Putnam wrote a well-known book called Bullying Alone, in which he said this: the single most common finding from half a century's research on the correlates of life satisfaction, not only in the United States, but around the world, is that happiness is best predicted by the breadth and depth of one's social connections. It's important for us to understand that relationships are key to who we are as human beings and what leads to our flourishing. This was vividly illustrated this last year in 2017. Research was published that declared that loneliness is a health crisis worse than the risk from alcohol consumption, obesity, and air pollution. It's reported that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And if you've read the popular book, Chasing the Scream, you know that there is an argument to be made of the correlates between loneliness and addiction, something that we need to think a whole lot more about here in British Columbia. As this last year, we had over 1,400 overdose deaths. Again, we need to think more deeply about these questions, about what leads to our flourishing and what does not. In a great book that I highly recommend called Alone Together, Sherry Turkle concluded from years of research that technology is seductive when what it offers meets our human vulnerabilities. And as it turns out, we are very vulnerable indeed. We are lonely, but fearful of intimacy. We are lonely, but fearful of intimacy, which is ironic given the information age has created an opportunity for us to be more connected than ever, and yet we are lonelier than ever. Again, this is something that we need to give more thought to, of what is leading to our flourishing and what is not, especially as we are heading down a path that is wanting to embrace a technology of artificial intelligence in particular, or as I call it, human mimicking machines, that we think are going to fill those desires, those needs that we have as human beings. And yet they don't. They continue to leave us isolated and lonely. Sherry Turkle then goes on to say this. She says, I believe that sociable technologies will always disappoint because it promises what it cannot deliver. It promises friendship but can only deliver performances. And then she asks this important question that we need to think about. Do we really want to be in the business of manufacturing friends that will never be friends? Manufacturing lovers that will never be lovers? What does it look like to be a human being? What does it look like to live in relationship with one another? She then says this, what we ask of robots shows us what we need. And I think that is very insightful. And one of the things that we are continuing to ask of our machines is relationship. But how are we going to satisfy that? The answer to those questions are profoundly built on what and who we are as human beings. And so tonight, we're going to begin to start the discussion as we look at a foundational question of what are the foundation of human rights. And even before I came out here, they were already discussing this. In particular, how does this apply to technology? These are important questions. I don't know if we'll get into that, but it's important that we start discussing these. And so I think that tonight is going to be a great time for us to kick things off as we start having these sorts of discussions, especially when we come together of people of different worldviews and we together talk on these important subjects. We need to do a whole lot more of this kind of dialoguing, and I hope that the Human Project will help you to continue to do that in a variety of different ways. So to do this tonight, we thought about who would be the best person to bring out to moderate a dialogue on human rights. And instantly I thought Justin Brierly would be perfect. Justin Brierly, we have flown all the way over from the UK. He has been the host of a very popular radio show called Unbelievable for 12 years now, in which millions have tuned in to listen to. It is very popular. And just recently, he published a fantastic book called Unbelievable. It is available at the back. Would you please welcome to the stage Justin Brierly, Andy Bannister, and Justin Trottier.